Oh Lord, Harman Smith is at it again about Palworld, saying that Palworld is bending the knee to Nintendo. Let's get into it, but also make sure you wrap it up so you do not curse us with another Harman Smith.
It's been a long time since I talked about Palworld because
Unfortunately, it hasn't been long enough.
at its core, this is not a relevant video game.
It's relevant enough to keep it in your mind.
All the copes, all the narratives, all the lies essentially amount to nothing. Palworld was never going to be successful. It was never going to be a big deal. It was never going to replace Pokemon.
Can you please give us facts and details about what you're saying because you're making no sense? Do you realize the amount of copies they've sold with just being in early access?
And this was pretty self-evident, right out of the gate. But the community could not bring itself to admit it. They bent over backwards to try and cover up the obvious plagiarism. They tried to shill for
Are you talking about the plagiarism that Pokemon did with Dragon Quest? Huh? Are you?
Pocket Pair. They tried to make them out to be some heroes of the gaming industry, and they pretended that they were 100% guaranteed to win the lawsuit against Nintendo. In fact,
I honestly do not think that Nintendo's going to win that lawsuit. I either think that Palworld's going to win it, or Pocket Pair, I mean, or I think Pocket Pair's just going to settle out to end it.
when this situation first kicked off, they were in denial that there was going to be a lawsuit to begin with. And after the lawsuit was announced, they tried complaining about some arbitrary difference between patent law and copyright law.
Well, because Nintendo's a bunch of big babies and they were seeing the success of Palworld, or Pocket Pair, I mean, and they sat there and tried to get them on copyright, realized they didn't infringe on any copyright, had no case, and then they sat there after the game was already released, like, oh, well, you know what? After 3 decades of this game being out, let's finally patent these game mechanics. Then they went and patented them after the fact, and then try to get them on patent infringement, which is ridiculous. It would be one thing if they would have sat there and patented those things before Pocket Pair released the game, but they chose to do it afterwards because Pocket Pair actually brought out a game that was better than Pokemon.
Ignoring the fact that Nintendo is suing for Pokemon related patents, right? It was, I think, the biggest example of how the PC gaming community is will bend over backwards to try and prop up some mediocre developer in order to get one up over Nintendo.
The only thing mediocre around here is your hairdo. You really got to do something about that. It is driving me crazy. Okay, you're going bald and you got a big ass forehead. You got to pick a struggle. You can't sit there and be going bald and have a big forehead.
You see this all the time, whether it's trying to say Celeste is a great 2D platformer, Hollow Knight is better than Metroid, or that Pizza Tower is some legendary.
You don't even like Metroid. You said in many of your videos that you don't like Metroid, so why are you even bringing it up? And I've never even played Hollow Knight, so maybe I need to.
Game that's never been done before. These people are completely out of touch with what's actually available on Nintendo consoles and how much their stuff actually stacks up. The big cope when it comes to something like Pizza Tower, for example, is that Nintendo hasn't made a Wario Land game in 20 years. Completely ignoring the fact that the 20-year-old Wario Land games are actually significantly better than Pizza Tower.
That's why barely anybody's even playing Wario Land right now. Maybe if Nintendo would actually release a new one and release something innovative, they actually would play it.
There are dozens of examples of this over the years, but I honestly feel like Palworld is the most blatant example. And I do think we can safely say at this stage that the reason for this behavior, the reason why people prop up these mediocre games so much, is purely out of contempt and hatred for Nintendo.
There's literally no hatred for Nintendo. Pocket Pair literally took Ark Survival and Pokemon, probably two games that they loved very much, and was inspired to make something that merged both of them together and then created Palworld. There's nothing wrong with that. Many people do that throughout gaming history. So many people have done that, Harman.
It has nothing to do with actually appreciating Palworld or thinking it's some amazing new thing or that it's evolving the Pokemon formula, right? It's just a method of condemning Nintendo and their fans, right? It's just a way for the narrative against Pokemon to take its next logical step forward. This idea that some other random thing is going to swoop in and be bigger and better. We
Understand that's what's hard for you to accept, but I promise you that may actually happen. I understand you're very scared. Get over it, Harman. It's not that bad when someone sits there and makes a better game than your precious Nintendo. That just gives Nintendo a reason to make it better next time.
We've seen this like a lot over the years when it comes to like other Nintendo franchises. But with Pokemon, like it's never really gotten any traction. There are lots of people who will try and tell you that like Okame was better than Zelda, or that like something like Astrobot was better than like Kirby and the Forgotten Land, or Baldur's Gate 3 better than Zelda. Like
All those games were far superior. That's why they won Game of the Year, something you could never accept. I'm going to laugh if Palworld releases their full release game after it's done with early access, and if it wins Game of the Year, I'm going to be laughing so hard.
Oblivion, Game of the Year 2020, like 2008, right?
Oblivion won in 2006, you freaking idiot. Learn how to use Google.
There was this huge push to try and make it seem like Nintendo was some dying company that couldn't compete with like the big boy developers, and
They still can't. If it wasn't for their Game Boy, they would have never even survived. They would have sat, we would have never even had the Wii probably, because their N64 and their GameCube sold so less compared to everything else. They were getting whooped. The only thing that was saving them was like the Game Boy Color and the Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Advance SP, the DS. That's what saved them.
yeah, Palworld is an example of that just falling flat on its face, because I think Nintendo's games are so specifically distinct and with their own unique mechanics that even something like Palworld, that completely changes the genre, being plagiarized by fans.
You only think that because Nintendo brainwashed you to think that. There was no plagiarism. If there was plagiarism, then they would have already won by now.
Like, there are plagiarized assets from Pokemon. They did steal mechanics from Legends Arceus.
They didn't steal any mechanics. They used PAL spheres. PAL spheres are completely different than Pokeballs.
It's a straight up copy.
It's not copying. It's called innovation. Maybe Nintendo should try it for once.
And Nintendo clearly has been demonstrating this in court. Palworld has had to take the knee and acknowledge that yes, they have been plagiarizing stuff.
Finally, over halfway through the video, you finally get to the damn point already. Yeah, they sat there and changed the mechanic. I forgot what they use now to sit there and catch and release the Palworlds. But you know what? Hey, they sat there and changed it. Maybe they should not have done the PAL spheres to begin with. But you can see a clear, distinct difference between a PAL sphere and a Pokeball.
They do need to make changes, and they do need to acknowledge their game as just being a complete knockoff of Pokemon.
And Pokemon was just a complete knockoff of Dragon Quest. They ripped off so many creatures in Dragon Quest, but you don't care about that. You only care when it goes against your precious Nintendo game.
They're trying to say that we're just gonna change the way the mechanics work then, and that like the cope right now is that like this doesn't mean anything and that this isn't gonna amount to anything. And
how is there any cope? They're literally trying to meet Nintendo part way, so they're like, here, we'll just change the way we catch them to make you happy, because Nintendo is nothing but a bunch of bullies just like you are.
And Pocket Pair is protecting themselves from Nintendo, but the reality is they're kind of already acknowledging guilt, and they're just trying to weasel their way out of it. They think they're gonna remain relevant after this lawsuit is through, and it just isn't gonna happen. Like Pocket Pair is going to get taken down. It is gonna be removed for sale. It will be stripped from consoles. They will be forced to issue refunds, and they will have to give Nintendo all of the money that their fans gave them to try and make Palworld into some big internationally respected IP.
Harman, you are on a whole nother level of delusion here. That will never happen. Palworld is going to continue to be a success. They're going to continue pushing on. They're going to fight through Nintendo's BS, and I cannot wait until you finally have to face the music. I guarantee you're going to be like, oh, well, the court system's against Nintendo. That's why Nintendo is losing. I guarantee that's how you're going to be.
You know, it's amusing to see this happen because it's exactly what I said would happen, was going to happen, like before Palworld even blew up. You know, like I didn't respond to the initial trailer because I understood this was a nothing burger product, but you know, I could see just how much.
Harman, do you know how much crap you say that doesn't even come true? Half of what comes out of your mouth is nothing but a bunch of bullshit that you probably hear from the voices inside your head.
Like the industry wanted to push this as like the Pokemon killer. It reminded me a lot of like Yokai Watch in that regard, where this thing was like pushed as this real, valid, serious competitor to Pokemon, and yet in the end couldn't even come close. You know, like
Unfortunately, very few have ever been able to actually successfully compete with Pokemon. Look at Digimon. Digimon is far superior when it comes to the video games in every way.
it couldn't get an animated series off the ground. It couldn't get like the merchandise to sell. You know, I remember that was a big thing. Like, oh, you can buy Palworld plushes on Amazon. Yet,
I love how you bring up Yokai Watch, which eventually did fail, which is very true. But how come you don't bring up the fact that Digimon, huh? Is it because Digimon is actually able to compete with Pokemon?
who do you know who owns a Palworld plush, right? And are they as quality as Pokemon plushes? You know, do they bring in as much revenue? Like this Pikachu plush, like by itself, this specific kind of plush has probably brought in more money than all of Palworld. You know,
I seriously doubt that. And can you imagine the amount of abuse that poor Pokemon has suffered at the hands of him? Oh man, if that thing could talk, I don't think I would want to know the stories that that thing could tell us about Harman.
like there was just no competing with that. You know, like people were just, you were never going to dismantle Pokemon overnight. You know,
Who actually said that they were going to dismantle Pokemon overnight? I don't think anybody was saying that, Harman. Only you are saying that. How successful Pokemon has become, there's no way someone's going to dismantle it overnight. That's not how that works.
and that was the mindset of the gaming establishment, is that we're just gonna promote Power World as being the cooler, edgier Pokemon, and it just didn't go anywhere. And now, you know, years later, it's becoming more apparent that like people only really talk about Power World when it comes to the Nintendo lawsuit. You know, like this isn't about the game anymore. All this is about is trying to downplay the biggest video game IP in the world, Pokemon, and its parent company, Nintendo.
Harman, you do realize that Mario has sold almost double the amount that Pokemon has, so you need to do your research correctly. Oh, I'm so glad this video has done. We literally went through this whole video and he gave not a single reason outside of them changing the catching mechanic, like, oh, Palworld's been in the knee and Nintendo's gonna win the lawsuit, with no actual facts to back it up. But are we surprised? Oh, I don't even drink, and this person is making me want to drink real bad. Gar and Desire, how do you guys get through these videos without having anything to drink? Well, that's it for my reaction. Let me know down in the comments if you agree with me or not. Please like, share, and subscribe. And remember, men, to wrap it up so you don't curse us with another Harman Smith. And until next time, stay vigilant.